My name is Margaret Dawson, and on my 60th birthday, my daughter gave me a $25 coffee card and called me greedy in front of 500 people. I can still see the picture she posted that night, me, standing in her spotless kitchen, still wearing the apron I'd used to cook her favorite roast chicken, holding that little green card like it was something precious. The caption read, "Some mothers never stop expecting handouts." At first, I thought it was some cruel joke. The comments came flooding in, laughing emojis, her friends teasing about boomer entitlement, even her husband. Eric's replied, "She's just sentimental about money." I sat at the dining table surrounded by empty plates, the smell of garlic and rosemary clinging to my hands, wondering if this was how motherhood ended, with mockery on a Facebook wall. I didn't say a word. I just turned off the kitchen light and listened to the house breathe, the hum of the fridge, the echo of my own heartbeat. Something inside me went completely still. For years, I had cooked, cleaned, and paid their mortgage without complaint, telling myself I was helping my daughter's family. But that night, staring at that glowing screen, I realized I'd become their servant. And as the laughter kept piling up online, I quietly decided that the next morning, everything would change. The morning of my 60th birthday started like every other day in my daughter's house. Too early, too quiet, and already filled with tasks that weren't mine. The sun hadn't even cleared the maples outside, but I was in the kitchen chopping garlic for Lindsay's favorite roast chicken. She liked to host dinners that looked effortless, so I made sure everything actually was effortless. For her. She came downstairs in her silk robe, hair in perfect waves, holding her phone up like a mirror. "Mom, don't forget the lemon zest this time, okay? Eric's mom said it gives it more flavor." Her tone was sweet, but it wasn't a request. It was a reminder of who ran the show. "Sure," I said, and smiled. That was my role, to say yes, to keep things smooth, to stay useful. By noon, the kitchen was glowing with the smell of rosemary and butter. I'd set the table, polished the wine glasses, even ironed the napkins because Lindsay once said wrinkled linen made the photos look cheap. I caught my reflection in the oven door, gray hair tied back, hands shaking from fatigue. It wasn't how I'd imagined 60 would look. The guests arrived at 6. Lindsay's voice rose above the chatter, bright and performative. "Mom's special dinner tonight," she announced, holding her phone up for a live stream. I stood in the background, apron tied tight around my waist, smiling like a prop in her perfect frame. People complimented the food, and she beamed, taking the praise as though she'd spent hours over the stove. After dessert, Lindsay clinked her glass and said, "Okay, everyone, time for a little something for Mom." She handed me a small white envelope. I thought maybe it was a note. Something personal. A thank you. A letter. A memory. Inside was a Starbucks e-gift card, $25. I blinked, thinking there had to be more. "Thank you," I said softly. Eric laughed. "You know Mom loves her coffee." I smiled the way women do when they've been slapped in public. Polite, mechanical, pretending it didn't sting. Lindsay reached over and gave my shoulder a squeeze. "Mom's sentimental about these things," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She thinks love comes in dollar signs." The room laughed, easy and clueless, and I wished the floor would swallow me whole. Later, when the house quieted down, I went to load the dishwasher. My hands trembled so badly that a glass slipped and shattered in the sink. Lindsay called out from upstairs, "Don't worry about that. Mom, just be careful, okay?" Her tone was casual, distracted, already somewhere else. After I finished cleaning, I sat alone at the table, scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw it, the Facebook post. A picture of me from earlier, still holding that stupid green card, my smile tight and brittle. The caption read, "Some mothers never stop expecting handouts," So proud to have learned generosity from the right woman, my mother-in-law. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Comments flooded underneath. "You're so real, Lindsay. That's why you're the best mom ever. Boomers can be so entitled. Lol." I stared at that glowing screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. I thought of every grocery bill I'd paid, every time I'd watch the kids so she could work late, every mortgage payment that left my account like clockwork. My hands were still wet from the dishes, and a drop of water slid onto the phone, blurring the image of my own face. It wasn't anger that filled me first. It was grief, deep and dull, like the ache after a funeral. I realized that the daughter I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as a prop, a resource, an easy target for performative virtue. I turned off the light and leaned against the kitchen counter, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. In the dark, the house felt different, no longer warm, no longer mine. Upstairs, laughter drifted from the bedroom, Eric's voice, then Lindsay's, soft and dismissive. "She'll get over it. She always does." But this time, something inside me whispered, "No, I won't." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake watching the ceiling fan turn, and somewhere between the slow spins of those blades, a decision began to take shape, quiet, deliberate, irreversible. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending this was home. The next morning, I moved through the house like a ghost. I poured cereal for the kids, tied their shoelaces, packed lunches, all while Lindsay scrolled through her phone, smiling at the attention her post was still getting. She didn't notice the silence in me. She rarely did. It had been 4 years since I moved in to help out. That's what she'd called it, back when Eric lost his job and the twins were just starting preschool. Just for a few months. Mom, until we get back on our feet. A few months turned into years. At first, I believed I was doing the right thing. I was 60 and still strong. I could handle morning drop-offs, laundry, dinner prep. It felt good to be needed again. My husband, Tom, had been gone for almost a decade, and the house in Asheville had grown too quiet. So when Lindsay asked, I didn't hesitate. I rented out my place, packed my life into a few boxes, and moved into their guest room, the one with no closet and a treadmill that never worked. I paid half their mortgage just to contribute, as she said. Then somehow it became the whole mortgage. I bought the groceries, covered the electricity, and when she wanted to throw that grand party for Eric's mother's 70th, I handed her a check for $45,000. It was supposed to be a loan, but no one ever said that word again. They always promised to pay me back when things settled, but somehow, things never settled. Eric found a new job. Lindsay got a promotion. They upgraded the SUV, and yet, every time the bills came due, it was my card they used. There were moments when I tried to push back, gently. Once, I mentioned that I missed Asheville, my garden, my old friends, my art classes. Lindsay laughed. "Mom, that town is dead. You'd be bored in a week." Another time, when I asked about repaying the loan, she frowned like I'd broken something fragile. "Don't ruin the mood, okay? We're family." And because that word, family, had always been sacred to me, I let it silence me. But now, every time I looked at her, all I could see was that Facebook post. Those words burned behind my eyes, rewriting the past 4 years. Every chore, every payment, every small sacrifice I'd made turned sour with humiliation. That evening, while folding laundry, I found one of Eric's dress shirts, the expensive kind, the ones I'd bought last Christmas because Lindsay said he deserved something nice. I sat there holding it, the fabric soft between my fingers, and felt a surge of bitterness rise in my throat. I realized I had become invisible, a background figure who made life easier for everyone except myself. I wasn't living with my daughter. I was serving her. For a long moment, I just stared at the pile of clothes, the small mountains of other people's needs, and thought about how easily I'd let them bury me. That night, after everyone went to bed, I opened my laptop. My bank account showed the automatic transfer, $1,800 on the first of every month, neatly leaving my balance lighter. I hovered over the cancel button but didn't press it yet. My finger trembled, not from doubt, but from the weight of habit. 4 years of silence doesn't end in one click. I closed the computer and whispered into the dark, not yet, but soon. The decision was forming, solidifying, not in anger, but in the quiet clarity that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The house was still, wrapped in that strange half-light before the world decides what kind of day it's going to be. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the streetlights fade, and felt something inside me harden, like steel cooling into shape. I made coffee, but it tasted like nothing. I left the cup on the counter and went to the small desk in the guest room, my so-called space. The treadmill leaned against the wall, covered in laundry, and beside it, a cardboard box still half full of my life from Asheville, framed photos, watercolor brushes, a cracked mug Tom once made in pottery class. 4 years, and I'd never unpacked it. Maybe part of me already knew this was temporary. I opened my laptop. The online banking page blinked back at me. The automatic transfer still scheduled for next week, $1,800 to Lindsay Dawson. I stared at the number for a long time, then clicked cancel. The confirmation popped up. Are you sure? Yes? It felt like snapping a chain link. Then I opened another tab. Flight search. Asheville. One way. I scrolled through dates and stopped at Friday. 2 days from now. Enough time to pack quietly, to leave before anyone noticed the missing sound of me. I booked it. My hand didn't even shake this time. In the kitchen, I started gathering my things, my books, my old teapot. The photo of Tom fishing on Lake Juniper, the one Lindsay said didn't match the decor. Each item felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. At breakfast, Lindsay breezed in wearing a blazer and perfume that smelled like citrus and control. "Hey, Mom, can you make pancakes? The kids love your recipe." I looked up from my coffee mug. My voice came out calm, almost gentle. "No, sweetie, I've got a flight to catch." She blinked. "A flight? What flight?" "I'm going home." Her smile faltered. "Mom, you are home." Not anymore. For a second, the room froze. Even the twins stopped arguing over syrup. Lindsay's face shifted, confusion, then irritation. "You're being dramatic. You can't just leave." "What about the mortgage? The kids? Dinner?" "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said, rinsing my cup. The words sounded foreign coming from my mouth, like something I'd been practicing in secret. She followed me to the doorway. "You're serious?" I turned, meeting her eyes for the first time in what felt like years. "I've been serious for 4 years. You just never noticed." I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I simply walked out, suitcase rolling softly across the hardwood floor. Outside, the air smelled different, crisp, clean, unfiltered by someone else's expectations. For the first time in a long while, I felt weightless. By the time my plane touched down in Asheville, my phone was already vibrating nonstop. I turned it face down on the tray table and watched the screen flash like a heartbeat I didn't want to feel. When I finally looked, there were 23 missed calls and dozens of messages. The first few were from Lindsay, panicked and confused. "Mom, where are you? Are you okay?" Then came the anger. "You just left? Seriously? After everything we've done for you?" By the fifth message, she was accusing me of being selfish, unstable, even cruel to the kids. I didn't reply. I walked through the familiar airport, bought a cup of coffee, and realized it was the best coffee I'd had in years, not because it tasted better, but because it was the first thing I'd bought just for myself. Later that day, I rented a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just sunlight, quiet, and my own key. That night, as I unpacked my old teapot and Tom's photograph, the phone rang again. This time it was Eric. "Lindsay's been crying all day," he said. "The kids are upset. You could have handled this better." I took a breath. "Eric, I'm fine. Tell Lindsay I'll reach out when I'm ready." He hesitated. "She says you owe us $850 for last night's catering." I laughed softly. The sound surprised me. "You tell her to send me an invoice." Then I hung up. The next morning, another flood of messages. Guilt, manipulation, anger, all neatly packaged in text bubbles. I opened my laptop and started saving them. Screenshots, timestamps, every word, and for once, I wasn't reacting, I was recording. That afternoon, I wrote a short email. Subject, repayment. Lindsay, please return the $45,000 within 72 hours. If I don't receive payment, my attorney will handle it. Mom, I reread it twice. No threats, no emotion, just facts. Then I hit send. Minutes later, my phone rang again. Lindsay's voice was high, shaking. "You're suing me. Mom, what is wrong with you?" "What's wrong?" I said quietly. "Is pretending love means debt." She started to cry, then shifted to fury. "If you go through with this, don't ever call yourself a grandmother again." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, waiting for guilt to come. It didn't. What came instead was silence, and in that silence, peace. Outside my window, church bells rang the evening hour. I sat with my tea and thought of Tom, of how he'd once said, "Peace isn't given, it's built." I finally understood what he meant. A week passed before I stopped checking my phone. By then, the calls had turned into silence, a different kind of noise, heavy and expectant. I started walking around the old neighborhood again, trying to remember who I'd been before all of this. One morning, I ran into Mr. Kaplan, my former neighbor. He was older now, his hair completely white, but his smile hadn't changed. "Margaret Dawson back in town," he said, laughing. "Thought you'd left us for good." "I thought so too," I replied. We sat outside the cafe where Tom and I used to go on Saturdays. Between sips of coffee, Kaplan told me something interesting. The city had approved a redevelopment project. A tech company called Bluewood Developments was buying out the whole block to build a new headquarters. "They're paying top dollar," he said. "If you've still got that house, you're sitting on gold." I didn't say anything at first, but as he talked, I felt the ground shift beneath me, the quiet click of fate falling into place. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Mrs. Ortega. She'd handled Tom's estate years ago and still answered the phone with the same calm voice. "I need to file a lien," I told her. "My daughter owes me $45,000 plus interest." There was a pause. Then, "All right," she said. "Send me the documentation." I forwarded every receipt, every transfer, every message. It took less than an hour. By evening, the papers were filed. 2 days later, Lindsay called again. This time, she wasn't angry. She was desperate. "Mom, what did you do? The bank says there's a lien on our house. We can't refinance. We're stuck." "You're not stuck," I said. "You're accountable." "Please," she whispered. "The kids. Take care of them," I said. "That's your job now." When the call ended, I stared at the sunlight spilling across the floorboards. For years, I'd been afraid of standing alone. Now, that same aloneness felt like strength. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to Lindsay's world. I was building my own. 3 weeks later, the phone rang while I was watering the small fern by my window. Mrs. Ortega's calm voice came through, the kind of tone people use when they're about to change your life quietly. "Margaret, are you sitting down?" "I can be," I said, smiling a little. "There's an offer on your property. Bluewood Developments wants to buy your house for $1.2 million. They're purchasing the entire block, and they want to close quickly." I leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of the words. 1.2 million. My modest home, the same one I'd left years ago because I thought love mattered more than walls and land, was now a golden key. Life had a strange way of settling its debts. Before the feeling could sink in, my phone started buzzing again. Lindsay. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me wanted closure, not avoidance. Her voice came through sharp and frantic. "Mom, the bank called. They said there's a lien on the house. We can't refinance. We can't get approved for anything. You're destroying us." I took a slow breath, staring out at the trees swaying against the pale sky. "I didn't destroy anything. Lindsay, I just stopped funding the wreckage." "Please, you don't understand," she said, her tone collapsing into sobs. "The kids, they're scared. Eric's furious. We could lose everything." I let her cry. Once, those tears would have broken me. I would have apologized for making her uncomfortable, even when I was the one bleeding. But not this time. "Lindsay," I said softly, "for 4 years, you had my money, my time, and my silence. You spent all 3 without thinking they'd ever run out. Well, they finally did." There was a long pause. Then came the whisper. "You're not the mother I remember." "No," I said. "And you're not the daughter I raised." When I hung up, my hand didn't shake. I felt light, like exhaling after years of holding my breath. 2 days later, Mrs. Ortega called again. "It's done," she said. "Your daughter's attorney wired $47,350, repayment plus interest and legal fees. The lien will clear by Monday." I thanked her, but I stayed silent for a moment, letting it sink in. This wasn't joy. It was something quieter. Vindication wrapped in calm. I printed the confirmation email and folded it neatly into an envelope. On the front, I wrote in careful handwriting, "The last payment I'll ever take from you." Then I placed it beside Tom's photograph on my desk. That night, I poured myself a small glass of wine and stood by the window. The sky was lavender, the city lights blinking like distant promises. I could hear faint laughter from a restaurant down the street, a reminder that the world was still turning, still kind in its own way. I thought of everything I'd lost and everything I'd reclaimed, my dignity, my voice, my peace. Some endings don't come with fireworks or applause. They arrive like twilight, soft, certain, inevitable. And as I stood there, breathing in the quiet, I realized the truth I'd been chasing all along. Freedom doesn't roar. It whispers. 6 months later, I woke up to sunlight spilling through tall windows that didn't belong to anyone but me. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and coffee, a mix that had come to define this new chapter of my life. My apartment overlooked the Blue Ridge Mountains, and every morning they reminded me how small and beautiful freedom can feel. I'd started painting again. At first, my hands trembled. The brush felt foreign, like something borrowed. But soon the colors came back. Soft blues, gentle ochres, streaks of light that didn't need to mean anything except that I was here. Sometimes people ask if I ever hear from Lindsay. I do. Occasionally, short, careful texts. The kids miss you. Hope you're well. Nothing more. I answer politely, but I don't reopen old doors. Some relationships need distance to survive, and some need silence to die with dignity. The settlement from my old house came through. I used part of it to open a small gallery downtown. On weekends, I teach watercolor classes to retirees who've forgotten they can still begin again. We laugh a lot. There's coffee and music, and no one asks me for anything but time. One evening, as I locked up the studio, a student asked, "Do you ever regret how things turned out?" I thought about it, about the years I'd spent trying to earn love through sacrifice, about how it took public humiliation to remind me I was worth more than a $25 card. "No," I said. "I regret waiting so long to stop apologizing for wanting peace." The wind moved softly through the open door, and for a moment, the world went perfectly still. That's the sound of freedom. Quiet, steady, and finally mine.